Gentlemen, the time has come once again to discuss things.
Hi everyone, for real this time. I'm Sid Part 2. Welcome to another episode of Geeky Gentlemen. Joining me today is...
I'm confused for fun.
And a Steve for fun.
A Steve for technical difficulties.
Yay.
Yeah. So today, I literally didn't know if you were like fucking doing a bit where you're like, you just weren't gonna show up because we're talking about... Today we're talking about Spider-Man 2, the Sam Raimi film from 2004, starring Tobey Maguire, Kirsten Dunst, Alfred Molina, James Franco, and others. It's a little known film, but you may have heard of it. It's only one of the most popular superhero movies ever made. But yeah, here we are. It's the film's 20th anniversary is what, this July?
This June.
I think it's... Yeah.
Wow, that's crazy to think about.
Yeah, man. I remember this was coming out in theaters.
Yeah, no, I remember, I think if I was trying to remember, what was going on in my life when I saw this, and I think I was living with my dad for the summer when this came out, but because my mom's a big Spider-Man fan, I told her I'd come down again for the weekend and we'd go see this. I think what was happening at that point in my life, which is just kind of weird to think about. Just how much shit has changed in the world since. So yeah, I don't know. It's a weird thing to think about this movie being 20 years old, because it still feels like it's definitely beginning to show its age in certain ways, but in other ways it still feels like just such a modern film that it's weird to think about it being of a significant age. But I don't know, it's a weird feeling to have.
It's also just like, this is not a qualitative statement necessarily, but it is so interesting going back to this and thinking about how much the landscape of superhero movies has changed, because this is not how we make them anymore. Not even by a long shot.
Yeah, I mean, for one, it's shot on film.
It's shot on film. It's done by an indie darling auteur director. It does its entirely its own thing in a lot of respects, even though it's got some comic book references. It's a good Spider-Man movie.
We're never getting away from this one.
I'm sorry. Well, we can continue talking.
No, that's fine. It is interesting though. One of the earliest episodes of Geeky Gentlemen is actually a retrospective of the original Raimi trilogy, and I believe it was just me and Bill at the time talking about it. So probably still like a listenable episode. And I remember my takeaway at the time was just like, I still really appreciate them, and there's things I really like about them, but I just don't think they hold up very well. This would have been like 2012 when I said that. And now, yeah, the like landscape and just the perspective of what I wanted out of those movies then versus what I want now has shifted very drastically. So you get just a very different kind of takeaway. That being said, it's not that I don't still have like things about this movie that make me laugh when I don't really think they're intended to, or things that I just don't think work very well. But overall it's a really interesting film to go back to, and it just kind of makes me want, want to return to this style of superhero filmmaking in some regards. It's quite an interesting little watch.
I find myself agreeing with Ian pretty much on this as well. Is like it's something where I've if you want to talk about like Alfie, like make you feel old childhood movies, is this is definitely like that fucking era where I was starting to get sentience and fucking starting to like shit. And so I remember Spider-Man 2, not necessarily going to the theaters to watch it. I think I did, but I don't remember that. What I remember is just pouring over the DVD. Like this is this and the prequels are like the things I remember most as like forming my creative brain by just going on the behind the scenes features and like this is how he made the Spider-Man suit, and like I've got to pay them back for that because that ruined my life for just that one thing alone. Trying to recreate that feeling like it's the Puff the Magic Dragon of just, man, I gotta get a suit that looked as good as it did in this movie because how did they do it? Like I was obsessed with it. So all the stuff about that and just how Raimi would go around and how they filmed the train fight and how much prep that took, and then just the film itself. There are so many iconic shots and lines just in this film sprinkled throughout. It's kind of insane, and what I think makes it stand above in one regard as like an innovator, I think, is I would probably argue at the time this came out, thank you, this was probably the best superhero sequel, I feel like. And I know Steve's got his beloved Batman Returns, right? But I feel like Batman Returns is less a sequel to 89 and more so now Burton gets to do the one he wanted to do. You know what I mean? Like, well, not even in a sense, but it feels more like a stylistic shift. This doesn't feel as much of a stylistic shift from 1 to 2. There's still, there's more horror elements in 1 for sure. You can tell that Raimi gets a little bit more blockbuster styled, but it still very much feels like the same director who now just has a different experience from his first time doing a big movie like that, and now he maybe knows how to use his money a little smarter. Now he maybe knows how to do something that's alright. He would have never done something like the train scene in Spider-Man 1 just because you didn't know how to film something like that, but now he can, so now he wants to push it as hard as he can. And you compare this very much, I think, the movie over any comic book that this owes the most to is Superman 2. This is very much
it's even like the same, like, you know, hero loses his powers kind of vibe and stuff.
It's in many ways it feels like, and to go to Steve's point of like we don't make superhero movies anymore. When was the last time there was like a superhero movie that was made to have a conversation with another superhero movie in like how we do with like films? You know, when like directors will make films as responses. This was Sam Raimi very much making a response to Superman 2 because that was a big influence in his childhood. And he was like, oh, this is what I want to see, what that kind of film, my take on that kind of story looks like. Because that's not necessarily... Spider-Man will have the no more, like, lose my powers story, but it's never done quite like this, where it's like a drawn-out thing over a multiple period of time. He just spends a good bit without his powers. He normally gets them, like, back, or he decides that he wants to be Spider-Man again by, like, the end of the issue. That's what happens in Spider-Man No More, if you haven't read it, is by the end of the issue, he goes back to being Spider-Man again. Like, it doesn't last that long.
Well, that's because it's Stan Lee's whole thing of every comic book is somebody's first comic book, so we can't have someone be introduced to Spider-Man and have him just quit forever.
Yeah.
We gotta resolve it in one issue. Nowadays, if you fucking did that storyline, it wouldn't be Spider-Man anymore for, like, at least a trade.
Pretty much.
Nothing would happen in between, don't get me wrong, but it would just be...
There you go. But no, I think that's super interesting, and again, it makes you feel back to this as even more than like the CGI or like how we do like the dialogue and stuff, even more than just it being on film. It just feels like a very time capsule thing where we were still kind of, the superhero movie wasn't quite a thing yet. This was like the thing that we once, if this did well, it was going to be, but then from this point onwards, it's like it feels like that change. Whereas this feels more so like it's a film that happens to be about Spider-Man, if that makes sense.
It's an interesting one. I don't know. Steve, you haven't given your general thoughts on this yet, so why don't you go ahead for a minute?
Yeah. So I mean, I think it's interesting you bring up Batman Returns because I think this has a lot of parallels to Superman too. But I also feel like the way that Spider-Man is handled in both of these first two movies feels very deliberately like an antithesis to Michael Keaton, Tim Burton Batman, where you're crafting a world in both cases and you're taking away all the things that make Batman cool or interesting, like the style and the money and stuff. One thing that this movie gets really, really right, that I think none of the other Spider-Man movies ever really do, is this is a movie that feels like a lived-in city. It's one that feels like it's a New York with its own character, and there's a lot of stuff throughout this one in particular where I feel like Spider-Man's money troubles feel important and relatable and sincere.
Dude, oh
The
my god.
the bit with the two scenes with his aunt early on that like always kind of wreck me are the one after his birthday party where she like forces him to take the $20.
Oh my god.
Like, Jesus Christ, man, I've had that conversation. I do not like watching it. It's so depressing. That
No,
was
just
so,
take it. It's not a lot. Don't you dare leave it here.
it's so
Like,
good.
holy
There's
shit.
that one, and even just like the little the bit of humor where like they can't refinance the mortgage, but she thinks she could at least get a free toaster, and she can't even do that. Like that makes me so sad.
Mm-hmm.
But that sort of element of it, where like you have the very sort of heightened gothic world of Tim Burton, and specifically in Batman Returns, you've got like almost this gothic ballet happening in the world, and you contrast that with Spider-Man 2, and it feels kind of grounded relative to that. It feels like everything that you would expect a superhero movie to be by that point is deliberately being inverted by the way Spider-Man positions himself as like a more relatable, almost teenage but past college age superhero. I disagree a little bit in that I don't think that this is like the growing pains we figured it out how to make a Superman or superhero film, or like this is sort of like the stepping stone to making superhero cinema. I think this is just it. I think this is the correct way. I think we cracked it in 2004, and we've steadily lost it since. This movie, I feel like, I'll feel exactly like you said. It's a movie that happens to be about Spider-Man in a way that I think we've sort of inverted that notion later on. We focus so hard on making superheroes work on film that we forgot that we need to make films first, and this is definitely a film first. I had not watched this movie in not 20 years, but it'd been a long time since I've seen this movie. And so when I rewatched it this past weekend, like I fell in love with it. I never had high expectations for this. I never had love for this movie. I always kind of wrote it off as like everyone says Spider-Man 2 is good. I'm sure it's fine. And then when I went back and watched it this past weekend, I had like a magical experience watching this movie. Like I was tearing up at the end when he swings away to save the day after MJ gets to his apartment in the wedding dress, and then she's looking out at him kind of soulfully, and then it's kind of like The Graduate, where like the woman in the wedding dress has this smile that slowly starts to fade into concern, and it's exactly like the ending of that movie with Dustin Hoffman. And I loved it. I think this movie is great. I think it's got some little hiccups here and there. I think the biggest hiccup is Tobey Maguire. Tobey Maguire's delivery of certain lines, I think, really hurt what they're going for. But I did this time around really love Kristen Dunst as MJ. I think she kills it.
Nah, that's like the biggest disagreement I'm gonna have. Is I just don't like Dunst's performance.
I think she does a really good job. I think the scene in particular that I really love is like after the birthday party, where she's waiting outside for him, and they have that conversation where like she's literally just like holding out her hand at this point, saying like, "Say it, Peter. Say you love me. Say you want to be together. I will not tell you anything about this other person I am dating in the meantime. I just want you to be honest and say the words." And then he refuses. And then almost like a slap back, she delivers that she's seeing someone. I really, really like that moment. I like how it complicates her as a character. And I really like Kristen Dunst as an actress. And I didn't really like her in the first one, but I do think she does a really good job here. I think it's just her chemistry with Toby does not exist, and that's the problem. But otherwise, I think this movie's great. I think this is a fantastic superhero movie. I think it's one of the best ever.
I'm so glad you brought that up, Steve. It's funny because I agree with you, Steve, and I also agree with Ian, which is really funny. But like, I've grown I used to be a little bit more harsh on the Raimi movies. I had my whole like I've read every Spider-Man comic ever published, and if it isn't exactly like this comic, then it's not good phase for a couple of years that you guys lived through. So like, I apologize to everyone who had to endure that, but I've since grown up. but but not in the boring ways at least. But we my thing with these movies, I've grown a bigger appreciation for them. I really, really like Spider-Man 1, and I really like a lot about Spider-Man 3. Spider-Man 2, I think, is, in terms of, like, stuff that interests me, is probably the lowest of those two. But I still agree with you. I still think this is a phenomenal film. I think this is a fantastic film. Anyone who puts this as their favorite superhero movie, or even some people who put this as their favorite movie ever, I think they're entirely valid, because I think this is very much, like, one of those defining blockbuster movies that people are going to keep talking about. This has got legs. This is going to keep being talked about. This is going to keep being remembered, and it deservedly gets that reputation. I think Raimi is super interesting as a creator, because not only is he a really good filmmaker, he's also maybe one of the only filmmakers working today that's a giant Steve Ditko Spider-Man stan, which is like insane to me. But what I love about that specifically is he's not just a Spider-Man; he is only for the Ditko run. He's very much like, I only like the first 33 issues. And then after that, I kind of dropped off, which is surprisingly, like, Alan Moore has that as well. Like, there's a couple of like, famous people who have that very specific experience. But what I think is really interesting about that with Raimi is he gets so much of the dynamics of, like, his life just kind of has to suck a little bit, right? Like, and no one, you can say that superficially, but being able to deliver that on film and get you to care and get you to have those moments, like that scene with Aunt May, or when he comes into his apartment and he just kind of sits on the bed and you just get a shot of the apartment, and it's still not shitty enough for what it should be for a New York apartment rent, but it's close enough than any of the other movies have gotten for how shitty his apartment should look. So, like, I appreciate that. There's so much other stuff in this movie that just gets to the heart of, like, this is why this character is important. This is why we should be even making a movie with him in it in the first place, is because you can appeal to a very young audience. You can appeal to an older audience who's going through their emotions of teenagerness, and then you can appeal to the people who have been through that and be like, I remember that conversation, or I remember all of this. Like, there's a very eternal quality to that, and I think all of that is fantastic. But to get to the point you were mentioning earlier, I think the only miscast person in all of this is Toby, because I think the script of this and how he delivers it, and I know it might not just be how he's directed, because he's apparently really difficult to work with, especially during this era. They tried to recast him with Jake Gyllenhaal for Spider-Man 2, in case anyone didn't know that.
That would have been so good, though.
That's where the my back joke comes from in this film, is because Toby was trying to negotiate for higher pay, and he said he wouldn't come back because he was in an accident and he hurt his back. And then when they said they were going to recast it with Jake Gyllenhaal, his back mysteriously healed. So now they put in a joke in the script where Spider-Man hurts his back.
That's so funny.
So, like, there's this whole back and forth drama, and like a lot of crew hated Toby and were always trying to pull pranks on him, but I just don't think he gets, because the material is going for more of a Clark Kent Superman vibe with Spider-Man in this, where you're having Peter and Spider-Man having more of a sharp contrast in their personalities, where with the way the Raimi mask is and with how sharp the features are and how, like, strong the jawline is, it's hard sometimes to even remember that's Tobey Maguire under that suit. Like, it is probably the biggest disconnect out of all three Spider-Man between a guy playing it and then when he's in the suit, especially with how big he is and, like, he's got a bit of more bigger in the shoulders, stuff like that. I don't know if you guys had that experience, but I've always had a little bit of, like, this is the Spider-Man that feels like the most different. I know it's intentional, but it's interesting as that was kind of antithetical to what Spider-Man's appeal used to be, at least in the Ditko comics, where he was more of a Peter Parker unleashed. Like, this is everything he wished he could have said to him. So it still feels like the same dude, just without a filter put over it. He was still a guy where comic Peter Parker in a situation where he doesn't get his rent and stuff, he'd get mad, he'd like punch the wall, he'd smash something, and he'd go on like a big soliloquy about how life isn't fair and why can't I do all of this. Toby Peter doesn't do that. He's very kind of whimpering puppy about it. And
there's a moment that I think really like epitomizes it, because what you're just talking about, it's in the script, but like the delivery just isn't there for it.
Right.
And it's during the, power like fluctuation scenes section of the movie, where he's just kind of staring out the window and the narration goes, "Am I just not meant to be happy?" And like you can kind of get that like angsty vibe from it, but just the delivery is just so like withdrawn and weird, and it just makes it not come off in the right vibe.
I agree completely with that, yeah. I think that's, again, like a different actor with this exact same material. Might not do it better, because, again, it not being like the comic Spider-Man isn't inherently a flaw. But I do wonder what that would have looked like, because everyone else is fucking almost one-to-one with the fucking page. Aside from a little bit examples here and there, but they're all closer than Toby is. And so I would like to sit down with Raimi and like talk about him with that, just to find where the choice comes from. Was it something that was trying to make it more sympathetic? Was it trying to be something that was more appealing to like the general stereotype of what a nerd is? Or was that just, we got Toby and we know he could look sad really well, so we gotta lean into his strengths? Maybe that would be the case. I don't know. I'd be fascinated to see what those conversations would look like.
There is something to, like, Tobey Maguire in 2004 specifically that sort of exudes, like, that sort of, like, nerdy emo kid vibe, especially because he's such a pushover and so monotone. And I feel like that is in the air in the movie, because as the credits roll, fucking Dashboard Confessional is the end song, Like, this has clearly got, like, a early 2000s punky emo vibe in it somewhere. And I think that may be part of the reason that he sort of feels like such a pushover, is to kind of make fun of that, or to kind of be in the zeitgeist of that stuff, where he feels like a teenager of the time. I think the problem with that, though, is the characters in the movie that are his peers, MJ and Harry, are not played that way, and they are extremely animated, and I feel like their role in this is essentially to emote and express verbally things that they wish Peter would say, or like goad him into saying something. And so the conflict is sort of like kind of what you get with Man of Steel, almost, of like everyone else in the movie is telling the protagonist what they should be doing or saying, but the protagonist
there's a hero in all of us.
Right. The protagonists just can't bring themselves to emote in the same way, and that sort of creates the tension. I think this movie handles that better, obviously, but it makes it rough, because like Harry, I actually really, really like in this movie, even though I'm not a big James Franco fan. But like the scene where he gets really drunk at the party and he keeps trying to like push and slap Peter and stuff, it is clearly like this intentional choice to like make Peter look concerned and offended, but not angry. And I wonder how much of that like sort of gets offset by how much Spider-Man stuff he does in this. That feels like the opposite, where like he's respected, people like him, people are trying to find out where he went after he leaves. He still has bad delivery, but he actually has dialogue that responds to people in the scene and stuff. I think they are definitely going for like that Clark Kent Superman vibe. I think the problem with it at the end of the day, though, is just like Toby's delivery is just so monotone, it almost doesn't sell it well enough.
Mm-hmm.
I agree. Like, again, there's some funny lines in this, like when like you want to talk about comic book brought to life, when he's in the bank, right? Which I think everyone talks about the train theme, but like the bank fight is also really fucking.
It's so
when
good.
did we last time we got a bank robbery in a superhero movie, man? Like
this movie, I think.
that's a fucking staple, man. That's like
I mean,
technically,
no, I'm gonna take you to task on that. It's one of the Holland Spider-Man movies where the Avengers rob the bank.
Oh,
that's an
right. That's
ATM.
Homecoming, right?
No,
I'm
because it's
talking-
inside. It's a bank. It's just at night, and it's just an ATM. It doesn't have the class of Doc Ock ripping a very obviously CGI safe.
Cartoonishly large.
With a giant bag of money. Like a
Just
fucking
bags of
cartoon.
golden coins just everywhere.
I love that
What
scene
was
so
this?
much.
So wait, 2004. What year did the Sacagawea dollar come out? Maybe that's what those are.
Oh my
Because
God.
no one fucking wanted them.
I fucking
Yeah.
love that scene, man.
To go to your point about Toby's delivery, like when he gets like caught by the tentacles, and he's got that iconic like cover pose, right, where like Spider-Man's head is being crushed by the tentacles, and he's like, "You're beginning to get on my nerves." He's like, "I got a knack for that." Like it's a classic Spider-Man line, right? Like that's really good. But then there's other bits like where he would get moments like that, and again, we're not asking for something that isn't from the movie. We're not pulling new lines and say, "Oh, they should have had a joke here." I think what we're all agreed from is like, no, the script is just comic Spider-Man. Like, if you looked at the words on the page, like it would read like Spider-Man. I don't know what choices Toby is making, but they seem to be going against what the writer, at least, is trying to do. And then Raimi, as the director, is just like, well, I'm gonna make this work.
Yeah.
It's littered with the kind of melodrama you'd sort of aspire to in this kind of movie. Like, he gets to have a hallucinatory conversation with Uncle Ben, which I love. But you also get,
Again.
like...
I was
What?
gonna say that's very Superman 2 as well, as he got a
Yeah,
second,
exactly.
He found a way to get AI Uncle Ben.
Yeah, no, so you have that scene, but I feel like Toby emotes in that scene very well, but I feel like the dialogue in that one's an example where it's a little bit off because I don't like how they shoehorn in the line "Spider-Man no more." I think that just in the moment sounds like a very unnatural phrasing for any human being to say in that moment. But I like how kind of off the wall a lot of that stuff is, because I like that he gets to just have a hallucinatory conversation like it's a normal thing that kind of dictates the trajectory of his character going from here. I love the over-the-topness of when he falls off of web slinging in the middle of the night that one time, when he gets up and regroups and he's walking down the street, there's just a wall of MJ's face going down the whole block. And it's so on the nose, and I kind of love it. Or even like Harry getting a chance to talk to his dad at the end in another sort of hallucinatory fashion. That kind of like cartooniness, that sort of level of the characters have really big emotions. They have very human emotions, but they exhibit them in ways that are extremely over the top. I think that the movie nails that tone. It's not so grounded that it's above that kind of stuff. The problem just kind of ends up being that like in those moments, Toby's doesn't feel like the actor to kind of carry it in the same way that like fucking J.K. Simmons does, or James
my
Franco
God.
does, or even
J.K.
or
Simmons,
even,
the best casting of all
Doc
comic book movies. Period.
this is the best JJJ in any Spider-Man movie ever, bar none. I fucking love
You can
him
make
in
the
this
argument this is the best JJJ in anything ever, and maybe
This
the
is
greatest
true.
thing Marvel. Like, you want to talk about not just peak casting, you want to talk about taking the material that was on the page that was already gold. J.J. Jameson, one of the greatest creations in all of comics. But man, what a fucking like iconic fictional character, man. Beautiful.
The bit at the end where MJ doesn't show and they zooms in on JJ and he's like, "Call the caterer, tell her not to open the caviar." It's so good.
I love the I watched the extended edition of this, which is like it's so funny because I got the DVD for it or Blu-ray for it, and it's it starts the title sequence, then the title comes up and it goes Spider-Man 2.1, which is just such an
2.1,
early
yeah.
2000s thing. But like the fucking scene of J.K. Simmons running around the office in the Spider-Man costume.
So funny.
It's such a good, like, I can't believe that didn't make the original cut of the film because it's just so fucking iconic. Oh,
even
it's so
just-
good.
I think my favorite scene in the entire movie, and maybe my favorite scene of any superhero movie, like, it's gonna be this, and then maybe something from the Batman, right? But just when the guy walks in and he's just like, "If only Spider-Man was here," he's like, "Spider-Man wasn't here," and he goes through his whole thing. He's soliloquying, and like they it makes me so happy as like a comic book fucking fan because they go out the effort to make the Spider-Man suit on the wall look like the comic suit where it's like in 7 pieces, where like that's not how the movie suit is built, but they built a prop specifically so you can get the comic panel shot. I fucking love that touch. And then like he's just like soliloquy, he's like, and you hear the whip, and he's like, "He's a menace! He stole my suit! I want Spider-Man!" And then the fucking paper comes in, he's back! And then he crashes through the paper, and he swings, and he goes into the shot of Doc Ock. Like, that is like 7 back-to-back fucking phenomenal choices in just a 2-minute scene. That is insane. That's absolutely unmatched. Like, again, I get chills just thinking about that. And I've been harsh on these movies and I think, but that always is like, what a sequence. What a fucking way to reintroduce your hero. That's so cool.
To both of your points, because I love the JJ in the Spider-Man suit scene too, but I can understand why they cut it, because like sitting down and watching this movie and like really paying attention to it, there's not a bad scene in the movie and there's not a bad cut or a bad transition in the whole. It moves at a clip. It's a little over 2 hours long, just like standard version, not counting like the extra 10 minutes or whatever that's in point 1. But it moves super quick. Every scene leads into the next. It's very, very good about maintaining that the perspective of the movie is Peter Parker's. There's a couple of scenes here and there, like with Doc Ock and Harry and stuff, where you're kind of jumping into someone else's vision for a minute or two. But like a 90% of this movie is just follow Peter's emotional state. And the way they're able to get that through the entire movie is really, really masterful. And I feel like the editing on this is just... they've shaved down all of the excess and just left you with a really lean movie that moves from scene to scene so smoothly. And Raimi's able to do that while on top of it having these moments that feel like they're just kind of like celebratory or like Easter eggs for himself, where like that scene with the doctors when they're operating on Otto when the legs come alive.
That's my favorite.
That is one of the coolest scenes in any comic book movie ever, but it's also like the most Sam Raimi thing Sam Raimi has ever done. It's
I fucking
so good.
love it, man. Like, upon rewatch of these, like, later in life and kind of knowing what Sam Raimi's, like, background is and stuff, which I didn't really understand when I was 13, 14, just... The thing, it's kind of been circling around lately, like, oh, Sony wants to bring back and do Spider-Man 4, and, like, I know Kirsten Dunst has said she's not interested, and I'm like, fucking good riddance.
No. She said specifically she's interested if they pay her a lot of money because she has kids to feed.
Yeah, okay. Last I heard, she was, like, trying to campaign against it, but, regardless, like, I want it so bad now because Raimi is a horror guy, and we've talked about this, that Spider-Man and horror just go together so well. And just watching that fucking scene with the operating table and Doc Ock, I'm like, God damn it, just give me my fucking man Spider, Sam Raimi, please.
If anyone was gonna do it, it was gonna be Sam Raimi to give you Man Spider.
I need it. I need it, man. Like, I don't really want a Spider-Man 4,
No.
because I'm kind of like, yeah, I'll just let it be dead. It's fine. You know, we've got a new Spider-Man now, and he's also not interested in coming back. But just, if Sam Raimi came out tomorrow and said, so yes, I'm doing Spider-Man 4, I'd be like, aw. And it's gonna have Man Spider, I'd be like, yes!
Yeah, I mean... part of what makes this movie so much fun to watch for that Sam Raimi-ness is, like, again, it's a point that we come back to a lot, where it's like, when you get invited into a universe like Spider-Man or Marvel or DC or whatever, there's a sort of incestuousness to it, where, like, you're just rehashing the same material over and over again every contemporary DC comic is just like a riff on an older DC comic, and it gets boring as hell. But this is back when we didn't have an established language for superhero movies outside of like Superman, Batman, and like Blade, because Blade 2 I think comes out around the same time as this.
And don't forget X-Men. Don't forget
X-Men. Yeah, I forgot about that. But
and
like,
don't forget Daredevil.
I love the Daredevil movies, so I'm not going to forget that. That's where that song premiered too. I fucking love that about it. But with this movie, you've got all of these like Sam Raimi isms, like the horror with Doc Ock's legs, but you've got like the Graduate reference with the way the film ends, and you've got the Superman 2 element of the story where he gets to have a hallucinatory conversation with his dad, but also has that bit where he's losing his powers. It's a movie that feels like if you want to watch Sam Raimi's filmography, you do need to watch this. It's not just a work for hire thing he did that's thrown in there in the middle of other movies that he cared about making more. It's kind of quintessential to his style, and his footprints are his fingerprints are all over it, but also just a lot of other good movies from the past's fingerprints are all over it. And that's part of what makes it fun to watch, is you can see this person say, how do you bring this concept to life, and what are the tools in film history that we can use to make that happen? Certain elements of it even feel a little bit like 60s Batman too to me, because it just feels like the action sometimes is that over the top. But that's part of what I like, the newspaper literally flipping in and Spider-Man punching through. That feels like a 60s Batman bit to me. But that's part of what makes this movie fun to watch. It's like, it's a movie first. It's got a really good, solid story. It's got a really good anchor on where this character is feeling. The movie's filmmaking is entirely oriented around getting inside Peter's head, and it works in a way where I feel like it's a satisfying beginning, middle, and end, where you don't need to watch Spider-Man 1 and you don't need to watch Spider-Man 3 or anything else. It's just a solid one-off movie.
Yeah. And it is interesting because, of course, the next film in the franchise is the one that, like, you know, is the franchise killer. The series killer. So like that one kind of has a massive dip in quality compared to the first two, which is still like really, you know, I don't know, shocking, but a bit surprising given how damn good these first two are, that they kind of still not only hold up today, but kind of outperform what's made today. There was probably a sweet spot after these movies in like the superhero filmmaking thing where you just had objectively like better quality, but it kind of died off fast, and just the formulas that all those movies fell into, that this movie helps establish and continue, certainly just kind of doesn't have that problem, you know?
Yeah, I mean, the same year you've got Punisher 2004, which I really like, but like you've also got Hellboy and Hellboy 2 that come after this, and you've got The Dark Knight and Batman Begins that both come after this. So like there is like this up curve for a little bit. I was messaging Alfie the other day. I feel like the sweet spot for superhero movies for me is like from 92 through like 2008. I feel like we were just doing banger after banger, because that's Batman Returns, Mask of the Phantasm, The Mask, The Crow, The Mask of Zorro, Blade 2, Hulk 2003, Spider-Man 2, Dark Knight, Hellboy 2. Like all the good ones for me are just in that little sandwich spot of 10 years or so.
And then the MCU.
And then the MCU happens. And then we get a couple good ones. We get Ghost Rider Spirit of Vengeance, which fucking rules. And then we get a Captain America movie and an Iron Man movie that are pretty good.
Damn. Just always think about like how weird it is that like Steve has become a completely different person, because he used to be the biggest MCU shill I fucking knew. Where like the MCU could do no
Totally
wrong.
Changed my mind, man. That is how that went. I realized that there were more movies in the theater, and then I watched some of those other movies, and I realized, oh wait, this is how a movie is supposed to be made.
Just crazy to me. Biggest MCU defender I ever knew. And then Endgame, and it was all over.
Really missed Endgame. You guys want to talk about Doc Ock? Because Doc Ock is
No,
so
I want to
good
talk
in
about
this.
Kirsten Dunst for a minute,
Okay.
because
Okay.
we've kind of danced around her. I think she is like objectively not only the worst part of this movie. I think she's the worst part of all three movies, and not just like her performance. I think the writing for her gets kind of progressively annoying. Like the first movie is probably when she's at her best. This one, she's got her moments that I still like, but she does seem to kind of like, I don't know, ride my nerves a little bit. The third movie, she like they intentionally do it, but they write her to just be unlikable and unwatchable, and I can't stand it. But this one is got like the like split of the two, where there's still some good stuff, but I don't know, man. Kirsten Dunst is Mary Jane. I think fundamentally there is the problem of she's not like Party Girl comics Mary Jane, which isn't inherently, an issue because fucking Zendaya isn't either. We've never done Party Girl Mary Jane on film. But at the same time, it's just the personality they go with, the portrayal they go with is just this really like awkward generic love interest character, and Kirsten Dunst just doesn't really do a lot for me to interest me beyond that. She doesn't play it in any way that I think is particularly good or memorable. So yeah, I've never really cared for Kirsten Dunst. I think this one she's tolerable, but it definitely begins to go downhill for me after this one too.
I'm with you in a lot of that, Ian. I still think if I had to recast just one person, it would be Toby, because my thing with Dunst is I think a lot of her scenes are, I think it's more of a writing issue with her than a performance and a chemistry issue, because a lot of her scenes are with Toby, and they're given a lot of, like you said, really kind of stuck, this is what a superhero love interest has to do, thing. And there are like hurdles of really interesting ideas. Like, I really like that we've kept the actress background, because god damn it, superhero stuff, stop making every love interest a reporter. Let Mary Jane be an actress. That's an interesting career. like just that aspect, I'm glad they're kept, because you can have some good drama with that, and I like seeing the stage setups you can do with that, and you can get some dramatic costumes out of that. And I'm even fine with the John Jameson engagement thing, because again, Spider-Man's a very soap opera story. Having the woman you love be engaged to another man is like quintessential soap opera storytelling, right? Like, that's fine. But when it comes down to, we don't really get much information about who she is and her wants outside of just kind of vagaries of her background with her father and stuff, which I think you don't need too much more. But when
You're
all she can
trash.
play off in that scene, yeah, is Toby, and Toby's giving her, oh, Mary Jane, I did you for a long time already. That's all she's getting to work with. Because I know Kirsten Dunst can be a really good actress. She was one of the best fucking young actors I've ever seen in my life in Interview with a Vampire, so she's got it in her. But I think there was just a lack of giving her enough meat material to work with to interest her. And then she's playing alongside Toby, who's giving an extremely underwhelming performance. So instead of focusing on her character, she almost has to be focusing more on getting Toby's emotions out. And Steve, you pointed out that other characters are doing that in this film, but she's definitely handling the brunt of that.
Just as
because
the
a lot
romantic
of
partner, yeah.
exactly right. So I feel like that's unfair to her. Like on Toby, I think is just making bad choices, but I think Austin is probably making the best out of a bad scenario where she's not getting the most. She's getting deserved the least on the script. She doesn't really have that many memorable lines aside from like the "Go Get 'em Tiger" part, and she doesn't really have anything to do in these movies. Like Harry's got his revenge plot. Even Aunt May's got that like progression. It's only until Spider-Man 3 where they try and give her like, all right, here's Mary Jane's individual career and how that's going. It's just like, well, we kind of moved past that pretty quick as well there. So I don't know. I struggle to put the blame entirely on her, I guess.
I agree with half of that, because I think she does a really good job in this movie. I think she's a very good actress, and maybe I'm just a little bit high on her because I've seen a couple movies with her. this past weekend, so like she's just fresh in my mind. But I think she does a really good job. And yeah, I think playing off Toby is what hurts her the most. I will say I don't think she really needed more material in the script. I don't think that's necessarily a problem because, like I said before, so much of this movie is just Peter's POV. It's his perspective. It's extremely cartoony and on the nose about how much his idea of Mary Jane is creating the world around him. So like the movie opens, the first shot of the movie after the really cool title cards is just an image of Mary Jane that you zoom out and it's just a big billboard of her face that sells what the entire movie is about. When he loses his powers and he falls to the ground, he's just walking in a sea of Mary Jane faces, and it becomes this weird sort of surreal thing. She's also the last face in the movie that we see when she's looking out kind of in worry, kind of in disappointment, kind of in relief, that really hard to read expression in her wedding dress. I feel like she's serving the story in an important way. I don't think it's necessarily a problem of her not getting into a lot of material. I think it's more just a problem of like the material she's given in situations where she has to bounce off Tobey Maguire and he just can't do it. But I do really like every individual moment where she's like pulling teeth to get Peter to talk to her. I do really like those moments, in part because I'm frustrated by Tobey Maguire's performance, but also because I think I can really see. I think I can also really see like her making the effort. The hurt in her face when she goes back to kind of apologize to Peter in the cafe, and then before she can even get the words out, he's immediately reneging on what she thought she could expect from him. That's really good. The bit in the play where she stops for a minute when she realizes he's in the audience and she's just kind of shocked, she sells really well. The mood swing from being able to talk in the street where they're kind of like friends again to being frustrated with him because he's so wishy-washy. I think she's doing a really, really good job as an actress. And I think the material is there. I think the problem is all Toby.
I mean, maybe. Like, I like Kirsten Dunst as an actress. I really love her in Melancholia. I Interview with the Vampire, another great film. That one episode of Star Trek The Next Generation she's on. Like, I like her as an actress. I just don't think she does a very good job in these movies. And you might be right that it's a lot to do with just where she's placed with the with how many of her scenes just revolve around Tobey Maguire. I do think he's also not the best pick. I don't know though. I guess I have fewer problems with Toby's performance. Maybe it's just because it's so ingrained and it's just how I think of these films. I don't really notice it as much, but something just about Mary Jane's scenes just always irk the fuck out of me. And again, we talk about this where it's not that movies aren't allowed to do original takes on characters. They're not like required by law to follow the comic books. And this like era of superhero films was interesting because the like creative teams behind them felt much more free to do just original takes, but they share the same name. Whereas now, like, you almost get fucking crucified if you do that in a movie. So it's not that it's a requirement, but it is certainly an unfortunate choice when you have a really strong take of a character from the comics that has, you know, these consistent traits version to version, and then your original take replaces it with something that just feels incredibly generic. I think the scene for me that like really stood out is one I just did not remember. I would be surprised if it's not like exclusive to the 2.1 cut, is Mary Jane and her friend talking about her engagement, and her friend like kind of railing on her because she's like, no, you don't actually love him though. It's like, I love him very much. You should think about him all the time. You should be so happy just to see his face, just to see him look at you. You shouldn't just love him very much. Like, she goes through that. I'm like, you know, I just can't believe anybody would feel that way about Tobey Maguire. Like, even his own family.
Yeah.
By all accounts, you might be right though, Ian.
Fucking, Babylon from a couple of years ago. Tobey Maguire has a cameo in that movie, and he plays the most terrifying, disgusting, evil-looking human being ever. And when you first meet him, he's just Tobey Maguire. Like, oh damn, that's real good casting. I am deeply uncomfortable.
Yeah, I don't know. So that scene just really stood out to me because I'm like, yeah, no, I mean, like, she is clearly not obsessed over Jameson's son, but also she doesn't really seem obsessed over Peter to me. I don't know.
That is also only in the 2.1 cut because that wasn't in the version that I watched, and I'm glad that scene's not there because I don't think that I think that would set the wrong idea because that would get more into that critique of superhero love interests in this era were very generic and bland, and their entire life revolved around the main character superhero, which to an extent Mary Jane's does, but the difference there would be if you have a scene where a female character is telling your female lead that she should be obsessed with the main character, that's more of an overt problem that I don't want to have to deal with, as opposed to she's just a background character to someone else's story, which is more of what we end up having here.
I mean, fair enough, but it is in the, extended cut, director's cut, whatever you'd want to call it, so it's not completely invalid.
I didn't say it was invalid. I'm saying I'm glad it's not in the theatrical cut.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
The other thing I'll just highlight with the MJ thing is again a very similar thing to what I said with Pia, where I'm just wondering what the decision was, because again, Mary Jane doesn't show up in the Ditko issues, but he does show up, and this is pulling on Spider-Man no more. She shows up once you get to Ramita very shortly afterwards, and she's in all of those things when Peter goes to college and stuff like that, and he's with Gwen, etc., and her characterization is entirely pulled from that. I know he's pulling from later stuff because of the home backstory wasn't introduced till later when you got to the 80s. But just everyone else, even Harry, man, Harry, James Franco, I don't normally, again, I'm kind of with you, Steve, I'm not normally a big fan, but he does a really good take on Harry where he's better looking than the comic book counterpart, which is kind of weird to have a universe where Harry is the good looking one and Peter's kind of the frog. That's really strange to me, but that's not their dynamic, but whatever. You get that idea where you've got Harry just getting to have those revenge things, and I love that you get to have that bit where he gets to engage in the comic book side of things, right? Once you got, he starts to become a supervillain, so now he gets his main character thing. It's like when Bendis says that you can only get caption boxes when you've become a superhero, so now you can get the narration boxes in your head. It's now you can see the flashbacks of your dead father telling you conversations because now you're also in this superhero type of game as a supervillain. But with Mary Jane, she normally offset that, but like you said, Ian, being this party girl, being this person that had their own Spider-Man persona, and just being entertaining to watch because she was so different than every other person in that life. It was someone who had just as hard of life as Peter, but rather than getting angry about it and kind of throwing a hissy fit and making everyone's your problem with this fucking martyr complex, she was just like, you know what, I'm just going to take a lot of drugs, I'm going to have a lot of sex, and I'm just going to deal with my shitty life. And you know what, that'd be really fun to see on screen, and I'm really annoyed we haven't got that yet.
Yeah. Alright, okay, so Doc Ock.
Yes.
The power of the sun in the palm of my hand. Do we need to say anything else? I feel like we're done talking about Doc Ock.
I love Alfred Molina as Doc Ock, man. He's so good. The scene where he has Peter over for dinner after they meet, that's, I think, the most alive Tobey Maguire feels to me in that moment, where he's just trying to have a conversation with Doc Ock, and he seems really engaged and really interested. But that Doc Ock also has this a fun, charismatic persona. I like that you get this banter with his wife, and when you see her die from the glass shards later, I do feel like it hits a little bit more. The turn he has after he wakes up with the 8 arms, and he is like thinking about the monster he becomes, and then the camera moves around so it's like the legs are convincing him that he's not, and he has like his evil switch. That's such good filmmaking. It's so concise and it's so well done, and it feels so corny, but in the best possible way. And the insane degrees that they went to get the both practical and CGI effects of the legs going is
Oh,
something.
it's so good.
It's so good, and it really kind of capitalizes on a point I've been thinking about lately, which, Ian, I'd be interested to get your take on, which is I think 90% of the time, bad CGI is not the CGI artist's fault, it's the director's fault. Because the CGI artist can only do what you ask them to do. And most of the time, a bad CGI integration into a movie happens because the director doesn't know what they want. So they don't film or light or create the set in a way that accommodates an appropriate CGI effect to look good. This is why something like the reboot Planet of the Apes movies look so good, is that they're all CGI and they're all motion capture, but they had the motion capture suits with actors sitting on real horses in real sets. They lit the actual scene, and then the CGI effects were added on top of a pre-existing fixture where they could capture what the natural lighting was supposed to look like and make it feel more real. Dune is the same way, where so much of that movie is built on real sets so that when the CGI is used, it's used in very specific ways where the director's like, I want the CGI to look like this. The sun needs to hit it on this angle. It needs to come in from this perspective. And when you give them those guidelines, the effects are going to look good no matter what. Even if they're not the best effects in the world, because they're inhabiting a world that already feels kind of real, they feel more real by proxy. And that's kind of what the legs have here, because there are moments where they are puppets and that they're real, but then there are other moments where they're entirely CGI, and you almost can't tell the difference most of the time because they take painstaking effort to make them look real, and Raimi knew how he wanted them to look and feel in every shot.
No, for sure. That's like definitely a big part of it. Part of it's also just the level of immersion you have in a thing. I think this movie's effects are a really good example of that, where you talk about the arms. I mean, just part and parcel, it's easier to make metal look real than it is skin, because just the natures of the material. Light penetrates skin, it doesn't penetrate metal, stuff like that. So that's like one part of the equation, but the thing I want to talk about is how dated some of the effects in this film are. It's so funny because I was watching this with Haley, and we get to that scene of Mary Jane and Peter in the cafe right before the car gets thrown in. And I think that whole sequence of the car getting thrown through the window, Peter having to dive over the table and grab MJ, all that, it's actually one of the best shots in the movie, which is crazy. I love that Doc Ock's plan of, I'll capture Peter Parker's girlfriend and get him to force Spider-Man to come after me, is just like, I'm gonna kill Peter Parker. If this guy is not Spider-Man, he's going to die. But so he fucking throws the car through the window, and that's like just such a brilliant sequence because, it's easier to do a car than it is a person, and it looks fantastic, and it's also integrated with a real car, shot to shot. It's not a CG car the whole time. Sometimes it's a real car, sometimes it's CG. Sometimes it's real glass, sometimes it's, just CG glass, blah, 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 blah. One of the best, visually best effect shots in the film, followed by one of the most dated and arguably one of the worst, which is when Ock grabs MJ and fucks off up the building. They both look so fucking bad because they are 100% digital doubles at that point. There is not a fucking shred of the actual actor left for any part of that scene, or that shot, I guess I should say. And there's a lot of Ock's digital double throughout the movie. Like Spider-Man's, at least he's in the suit the whole time, so it kind of blends. you can definitely still tell, but it blends a lot easier. Whereas Ock, there's just so much like human skin visible that like a lot of the shots of those fights with Peter just look really dated to the point where, yeah, that's where you can tell this movie's 20 years old. But funny enough, no one really cares. I don't ever hear anyone talk shit about how bad the CG is in this movie or how dated the CG is in this movie for those fight scenes, for those action sequences, because you're just so engaged with the story by that point that your mind just ignores it. Mm-hmm. Like, I remember watching these movies when I was much younger, and I never really picked up on the obvious CG-ness of these two characters. And it's because I was just so engaged and you're just so into the moment in the movie. And, to Raimi's credit, he does a lot of intercuts, whereas like nowadays with like a lot of MCU films, you'll have these, long sequences that are just two CGI characters beating the shit out of each other. And you almost never actually cut to a real human face throughout the entire battle sequence. That becomes a problem. Raimi, intercuts to the actual actors, Toby in costume, Alfred Molina really there with the puppeteered arms even. And that helps really sell and keep you engaged and hide the work. But ultimately, you've got CG here that is really, really showing its age that I think was probably more obvious in the early 2000s than a lot of people wanted to admit, even though it was very cutting edge for the time. But like, I still see people today claim that Spider-Man 2 has some of the best CG ever, and they usually will talk about the fucking arms, but no one wants to talk about the goddamn digital double, which just looks like a rubber man. It's unfair with CG effects to pause the frame and look at it, because that's not how it is meant to be seen. That's breaking the immersion of the art form. That being said, you can start to see the rubberness even when it's moving, and if you decide to pause and really hold on it, it becomes like incredibly obvious. And it is maybe a little unfortunate because I've definitely had this where, again, when I was younger and watching this, never noticed it was never a problem. When I got older, I got more into CG and learning more about how digital effects are done and stuff, and started doing some myself. I go back and I watch this, and now I just can't not see it anymore. And so it's a little unfortunate that, like, I feel bad talking about it almost, because someone's probably listening to this that has never really noticed it before, and now the next time they go back, if they remember me talking about it for as long as I have been, they're gonna fucking notice it now. And I'm sorry. What is known can never be unknown.
What I think is super interesting about that point, Ian, is I feel like that's almost like... Do you remember that shot in Spider-Man 1 where the Green Goblin's on the parade and he jumps on the glider? It's almost framed the exact same way, and it's the same digital double. It looks... And it's so bad it stands out from the rest of the movie, because like, Spider-Man swinging from this, like, when he's up close a little bit, you can tell it's different from the real life suit. Like the texture of the webs is different. Like, you can notice that shit, but it's kind of indistinguishable, right? Until you say what you say if you focus on it. But the constant dunce thing, I noticed that ever since I was a kid, and the goblin on the glider thing, because they just look different from the rest of the movie. Mm-hmm. I wonder why those two shots are there like that, and I almost think maybe that was like, studio executive is watching the movie and they're a fucking idiot, and they're like, well, where did Doc Ock go? Where did the Green Goblin go? So like, fuck, we gotta add in a fucking scene of them leaving the crime so we can fucking show that here's Doc Ock walking up the wall. There's maybe in the original cut, maybe there's like a quick cut or something, I don't know. But that's what I think maybe happened, just because they look... It's not just that it's emblematic of how the movie looks as a whole, it's those two in those two movies are like noticeably worse than the rest of the movie CGI.
Mm-hmm. And again, I wouldn't say it's just those two. I think... Again, the scenes that he and Peter are fighting are very... Like, the train sequence, it's really, really cool. I really love the whole train sequence, but like those big sweeping shots where the camera's moving as the train's moving, as they're both moving and fighting on top of the train, really, really like very noticeable, very, very bad. Or not bad, very, very dated. And it is, interesting with these movies getting a release again, a new series of releases. I'm beginning to wonder if they're gonna go through at any point with some of these, early 2000s superhero movies and do Lucas and do a remaster for just the visual effects.
I really hope not. I hate when they do that shit. I hate what it means for preservation, and I hate the idea that you took something that is of its time and refused to let it just be of its fucking time. That's so annoying. I hate that. I hope they don't. But you're right. I mean, there are moments in the movie that I think the CGI stands out and it's dated, but because you're so immersed in the story, it never really matters. The train sequence...
Again, I've said this for fucking years. The only reason you know is because you know.
Yeah, exactly.
Is like 90% of the time when someone complains about, oh, the CGI is so obviously fake, you only say that because you know it's not real. If you approached it from like complete ignorance, you would be absolutely sold every time. It's fucking ridiculous.
The train sequence, though, is something that I did want to mention because as far as like action set pieces go in a lot of contemporary movies, not just superhero movies, but just contemporary movies, most of the time it is just like a straight like last half hour of the movie is just a knockout drag out brawl of the good guys versus the bad guys and guns blazing and shit. All of the subsequent Spider-Man movies kind of do this, but the fact that this movie's big action set piece is just Spider-Man falls on the train and has to stop it from derailing, and then there's like a brief skirmish here and there, but there is no big grand fight that traverses the whole city. There's no massive amount of property damage that occurs in New York. The fact that the movie like takes pains to show you that debris is falling, people are getting hurt, and that Spider-Man is trying to save as many people as possible and stopping this train from derailing, and that's the height of the tension in a climax of one of these movies, feels so refreshing now.
Mm-hmm. I like the way that a lot of action of little consequence is peppered throughout this movie. Like the fucking car thieves or whatever that prevent him from getting to the play on time aren't related to fuck all else in this movie. They're just petty crime that's happening. I don't feel like we do that a lot anymore. Like sometimes in the superhero movies, you'll get like one sequence early on as like your introduction thing. Like Black Panther has this, right, where he's got to stop the human traffickers. But it's like it's tied to getting his girlfriend to come back to Wakanda with them. But it's just not like we don't do it. It's just like, oh, and here he is stopping some random crime or tragedy from happening. It's not connected to anything else that's happening in the movie. It's just there.
That's why I feel like this movie is like, this is the formula, because this feels the most like, in many ways, what I would want more superhero movies to be in general, where it's like the superhero is a superhero. He stops crime. He catches criminals. He goes around and saves the day, and that's just part of his day-to-day life. So much of this movie is scenes of like just Toby going around and stopping or not stopping very specific things that kind of sell this idea that he's the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. He lets a dude just get mugged in the alley and watches. There's that carjacker
beat
scene
the shit out of that dude in broad daylight.
he dives into the building to save that little girl, and then the fireman mentioned that another guy on another floor died, and like all of these moments of just everyday human suffering that he feels responsible for is the core of the story without it having to be some kind of convoluted plot mechanism. And that's part of why this is so much fun, is like you sit down and you watch this movie beginning to end, and the story is very, very simple. It's not a big convoluted plot on Doc Ock's part. Doc Ock's part of it doesn't even really matter until halfway through. It's not a big convoluted Harry thing. It's not like a big convoluted love triangle. It's just this intimate story of like, here's a day or a week in the life of Spider-Man. where he feels like he can't get anything that he wants, decides he doesn't want to be Spider-Man anymore, feels the consequences of his actions, and then goes back and accepts them. And I like that the movie kind of has both hands of, here's a little bit of tragedy because now your relationship to Harry is ruined, but here's a little bit of solace because now you have this new relationship to MJ. And it feels like it goes through an entire wave of emotion for the character without making it seem like everything that they do is big, extravagant multiversal shenanigans where the fate of the universe is at stake.
No, I agree, and I feel like we've all spoken about this, not as much recently, but I know we all want this. Where like, how come none of these fucking movies have ever done just like, oh, here's the shocker in the bank robbery? You know, we do these sequences, right, where it's like, oh, those guys, the car robbers, right? Like, man, wouldn't it be just cool just to have like a villain in one of those 1 second sequences that's just a random throwaway fucker that's never going to be the main dude of a movie? But it's like, oh, that's just showing that while we're not watching this movie, he's stopping villains and other crime, things like that. Like, I know Spider-Man 4, the original plan for that was going to have him just in a sequence, he was going to arrest Mysterio, and it was going to be Bruce Campbell. As just like not like a setup thing, it's just gonna be a throwaway gag, and I'm like, man, I love stuff like that. Like just showing that again, the idea of the comic book superhero isn't this thing where like they just get out of bed when there's a big event and then go back to sleep like they're the goddamn fucking Z fighters. Like no, it's every day for these guys. This is every day they're up against some random new shit, and it would be nice for the movies. Because we do that with like other people who have drugged. Like, James Bond is always like on a mission or something, or we're always showing that if you've got a movie about someone who owns a restaurant, they're always cooking every day. Like, why come the superhero guys never get to do their job every single day? It's weird.
Yeah, no, I love all those sequences. But again, they were beating the shit out of that dude in broad daylight, like off a main
It's fucking
street.
New York, man. They just do this shit, apparently.
And everybody, like Peter just walked by, but like everybody just walked by.
The kind of eternal tragedy of Spider-Man, I feel like, is that poor Uncle Ben fucking gaslight his kid into becoming Spider-Man to be responsible. Meanwhile, he probably could have been shot any other day of the week because the city is a cesspool, and it's no one's fault.
Well, like, I just think it's so funny that, like, Uncle Ben is by far the most unrealistic New Yorker of all time.
Yes.
No, you need to care about and take care of people and do the right thing. Meanwhile, like, New Yorkers, that building's burning down. Fuck if I care.
I love that so much. Okay, sorry, I have one more thing. The Uncle Ben moment with Aunt May, where he explains what happened to Uncle Ben. And then her immediate reaction to it, and their reconciliation later. That is a character arc I absolutely adore, and I think it's maybe the best thing in the movie, with one mild exception being that the way Toby explains the story makes it sound like the most convoluted nonsense ever. That line delivery is very clunky. But aside from that, the idea that he spends this entire movie trying to reconcile this idea of what exactly does it mean to take responsibility, and balancing what his life is in terms of the responsibility he has to others, and making a very reasonable choice, I think, of deciding not to be Spider-Man because it is actively making his life worse, and then just kind of dancing around the consequences of that while he sees other people get mugged and stuff. And the moment where he decides to do that, he sees Uncle Ben and he tells him no to his face that I don't want to do this. And then the inversion of that, of when he decides to finally take responsibility for real and realizes that it's not about getting what he wants, but about doing what's right by other people, and confessing to Aunt May something that is completely unprompted, something that was never going to ever come up, something that didn't need to have consequences, and allowing himself to be vulnerable in that moment and say, look, our relationship might never be the same again, but I have to tell you this because I owe it to you. And her getting an extremely human reaction to it. And then when they reconcile at the end, there's no, like, closure moment of like everything you did up to this moment was correct, Peter. Thank you for telling me. It's more human than that. It's more just like I understand and we can move past it because we're family. And that like level of nuance and humanity that these two have with each other, I think is maybe the best in any superhero movie ever.
I'd agree, though I will say the reconciliation scene, I kind of wish ended a few minutes earlier. You mentioned the Man of Steel thing, where it's like everyone's kind of telling him what he has to do and what he should do and how he should feel. And like, just that whole sequence of, I believe there's a hero in all of us, it, like, they really start to push Aunt May that she has to be, like, the one to explain what Peter needs to be doing and what, like, Spider-Man represents and stuff. I really don't care for that side of the scene. I kind of wish it ended on a bit earlier in the moment.
Yeah, that bit of dialogue, the way Rosemary Harris plays it, it almost makes it seem like, oh, so Aunt May, you know Peter's Spider-Man. Is that what you're trying to tell us? You already know and you're just trying to push him in that direction? But no, I agree. I think that there's clunky line writing in the collective that collective arc. I don't like the word choice of how Peter explains how Uncle Ben died, and I agree with you. I don't like the fact that she just has to externalize the whole theme of the movie at the end. But the performance and the connection and the fact that like the reconciliation is so ambiguous and nuanced, that sort of core of it, I think, is really, really good.
Mm-hmm. I could agree there. The emotion of the scene, it's crazy because I remember people really turned on what was the actress's name?
Rosemary Harris?
Yeah, Rosemary Harris. I remember people like really turned on her and started to talk about her like she was the like worst part of these movies, like the fucking how it should have ended. It's like, oh, that reminds me of a really long, boring story. Honestly, she gives, at least in this film, I don't really remember, like, a lot of it doesn't stick out in my head for the other two films, but, like, this film, she's got two scenes that just fucking steal, or, like, not even two, she's got multiple scenes that just fucking steal the show here. The $20 one just breaks me. Just absolutely murders me and mugs me in broad daylight while everyone else just walks right by.
that scene is almost like being on a runaway train where you think you're going to die and Spider-Man's the last thing that might save you.
Yeah, pretty much. Like that one's really good. The scene you mentioned where she runs up the stairs because she just can't even look at Peter at the moment. I really like that one. But then just, like, the whole sequence with Ock is so good, man.
I love it so much where she hits him in the head.
She hits him with the umbrella, like, the bit where she's dangling from the umbrella and she, like, is slowly, like, slipping because Peter can't get there in time. And then she ends up, like, being able to touch the ledge and she looks up and it's a statue of an angel she was hanging on. Yep. And she just like looks at it and goes, thank you. I was like, oh my god, it's so perfect. Good.
And I even love that the movie doesn't feel the need to have like a happy ending with her necessarily. Like you don't have fucking Bruce Wayne showing up and buying the house out from the bank. You have
No, Steve, he bought the bank. It's completely different.
It's true. He's completely different. No, you don't have that. You just have you open the movie with she's gonna get foreclosed on. They can't make the payments because no one has any fucking money because it feels like real people. They can't get refinanced. And at the end, she just gets rid of the house and finds a little apartment. And that's it. And that's just life. And I fucking love that.
Mm-hmm. Nah, that sequence is great. I love everything done with her. She is kind of the heart and soul of the movie in a lot of ways. Low-key might be I don't know. She's either number one or number two for performances and like across the franchise. Willem Dafoe, though.
Willem Dafoe would be up there, but I mean I don't know. I think Alfred Molina also puts a contender up for like best performances in these movies.
How interesting that this man has only ever done this movie and nothing else.
Oh man. But yeah, I mean, I think Rosemary Harris definitely, like, after this viewing solidified for me, she's the best Aunt May. I love her. I think she's fantastic. She's the best written Aunt May, and I think she's the best acted Aunt May.
I don't know. I like.
Really good.
I really like Sally Fields, and
I was
I
gonna
like
say
her as
Sally
well.
Fields.
amazing.
Sally Fields is mine just because her. Yeah, it's kind of cheating, just because her and Andrew Garfield are basically Peter Parker and Aunt May in real life, so that just comes onto the screen really easily in a way that it doesn't with Toby. So for some, it feels like cheating, but I think it's what I was gonna say is just as a kind of snide fucking jab. Is Kevin Feige made a big deal after Homecoming ended, right? Where he was like, oh, I'm a really big fan of the JMS Spider-Man run, where Aunt May finds out Peter is Spider-Man, and they have a conversation, and they talks about forgiving him for Uncle Ben's death, and like, I really want to get that on film one day. And I was like, wow, I guess in between those movies, he must have rewatched Spider-Man 2, realized they did that scene, and decided to never touch that material again. Because, like, wow.
It's like night and day watching what they do with her in those movies compared to these.
I feel so bad for that actress. Her name escapes me
Marissa
at the
Tomei.
moment, but
I love Marissa
she got-
Tomei too.
She got fucked over so hard. I feel so bad for her.
She does. Yeah. It's really, really unfortunate because she's a really good. I mean, I think all the Aunt May actresses in succession are all really good actresses and all bring interesting things to the role. I think with Sally Field in particular, you've got like really good moments in Amazing Spider-Man 2. I think that the trouble is with the Amazing Spider-Man movies, you have the exact opposite problem of these movies, which is Andrew Garfield is a really magnetic lead where every actor in the film immediately has chemistry with him, and then everything else is bad. And then these movies, you have Tobey Maguire, who is a very unmagnetic lead, you might almost say a repellent lead, where no one has any chemistry, but everything else is good.
That's kind of a great
Alfie
summation of
literally
my
shaking right now.
thoughts. No, I that's kind of a complete summation of like, yeah, man. I wish I lived in a universe where I could time travel and put Andrew Garfield in these movies.
I know. Like I was just thinking
It's-
the other day. Like if someone wants to use AI for good and just AI generate Andrew Garfield in Tobey Maguire's place in Spider-Man 2, it might be a perfect movie.
Like, man, I'm just like, just give me. That's just what I want from a Spider-Man movie, man. I just want that characterization and the setting. Just do that. It's great. It's easy. We've got so much examples.
Oh well. Alright, we kind of went from starting to talk about Doc Ock to talking about, like, CGI and then Aunt May and a bunch of other shit. Is there anything specific we wanted to talk about with Alfred Molina's Doc Ock?
I just really want to kind of harp in on the point that like I think he's not necessarily like an extremely complex villain in terms of like what his motivations are, but I think he's played really charismatically, and I like how limited we are with him in the movie. Like there's nothing overcomplicated about this. There's no like really grand master plan. There's just like this human connection between Peter and Doc Ock early on in the movie. There is this literal embodiment of hubris of flying too close to the sun with the reactor. There is this monstrous transformation, and then at the end he sacrifices himself to save everybody. And it's very simple, but it's conveyed very effectively, and I like that nothing about that conflict has to end with the hero beats him in a fist fight and now the day is saved. I like that it is, even by this point, more complex than a lot of other superhero movies would have been up to this point, where you just have like Batman come in and start punching people out and the movie's over. Or Superman comes in and he throws his giant S shield at Zod, that it's giant and plasticky, and he stops them in their tracks. You don't have to do any of that shit. You could just like have Peter appeal to Doc Ock's humanity, and Doc Ock will save the day, and it's great.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The one thing I'll just say on Alfred Molina Argo specifically is he's not really book accurate at all, except for one aspect that kind of carries it, and he's pointed out this himself. Like, the whole way, I like my Dr. Octopus pretty straightforward, mad scientist supervillain, like who's just out to do it because he thinks he's better than everyone. But the number one characteristic that separates the bad Doctor Octopus from the good Doctor Octopus. And this is what Alfred Molina, in his casting interview, very eloquently laid out. Is he was like, I was reading the old books, and I was going through this guy, and I seeing all these other supervillains, and he was the guy who would get out his tentacle, and he'd fucking light a cigar with it, or he'd put on a suit. He had a level of class to him. And that's what I love about Doctor Ock, and that's what he's got in this film. Even when he's got his fucking tits out, and he's got his leather coat and shit, but, like, he's always got this aura of, like, I know I'm kind of hot shit, right? And, like, octopus tentacles is kind of a stupid, silly power, but the way he carries himself and the way he uses them is the difference between Dr. Octopus being made a figure of, like, patheticness versus, no, this is the guy who's in contention with fucking Venom, as this is the main Spider-Man villain, because he's just got such an aura around him, right? Like, people talk about having, like, aura, like, when you just see someone who's inherently charismatic. It's like, Dr. Octopus is one of those characters that kind of like Lex Luthor. To truly nail, you've got to get an actor who's got that inherent charisma, and Molina's just dripping in it, so perfect choice. I'm so glad. If you're going to change anything else about Dr. Octopus, I'm so glad they understood that that's the core of the character. That's his appeal. Is unlike Peter, he's kind of the cool fucking nerd. Like, he's the guy with all the confidence in the world.
I don't know if this is in the original cut or not, but he does actually end up lighting a scar in 2.1.
Yeah, he does. He does.
Okay,
It's so sick.
I couldn't remember if that was in the original cut. Yeah, there's that, and then, like, the scene where he uses the tentacle to pull off the hat and shit. It's just so cool.
I love his look in this movie. I love the big trench coat with the tits out and the giant tentacles coming out of his back. I think it just looks cool as hell.
Yeah, I'm glad when they keep him, and I don't need the shirtlessness, but I love the coat for Ark, man. I think he should always have the coat.
He has it in Ultimate, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does. He gets it in. He doesn't have it in the first arc, but then this movie comes out, and then Bendis gives it him. It's great.
That's right. That's right, because Bendis does the same thing with Daredevil, where Bullseye loses the costume and Daredevil beats the shit out of him, and he's just movie Bullseye.
Yeah, I love it. I always think the coat was always a good choice for Ark. Help separate him out from all the other villains. Just again, that level of class, that level of charisma.
In the Doc Ock story in Fraction's Iron Man run, I think he has it too.
Yes, he does.
Anyway, yeah, I love Doc Ock in this. I think he's great. I think he's a fun, not necessarily complicated, but very engaging villain, and I think as a foil to the utter insanity that is Green Goblin in the previous film, it's a nice touch. That you don't have to go that hard again, because you know you're never going to top it, so you go a little bit more subdued.
Yeah. I like Molina quite a bit in this. He's a lot of fun. He was one of the ones I was really excited that they did get back for No Way Home, and it was fun seeing him there again too. So it's a good time. It's a good time. All right. I think that's it. I think we've pretty exhaustively talked over this 20-year-old movie, so I think we're gonna call it there. Do we want to do a rating? I mean, I think we're all, like, pretty fucking positive as could be.
I mean, mine's going to be a 5 out of 5. I don't know if anyone's got any different.
Yeah, I don't know. I'd go a little lower. I'd say mine's, like, 4 out of 5. Doc Ock's weird bruise that's, like, forming around the tentacles clamped around his stomach.
Yeah, that's a little uncomfortable to look at, isn't it?
It is, like, again, one of those, like, I can't unsee it moments. A friend of mine pointed that out to me back, like, early days, back when we were watching this, like, new DVD release, and I was like, fucking gross. I was like, yeah, it's gross as shit, isn't it? And we just could never unsee that.
I guess I'll... If you're going to do that, I'll do 5 out of 5 billboards of Mary Jane's face.
For me, I was going to give it a 4 out of 5 like Ian, but because you reminded me of it, like 4.1 out of 5 because of the 2000s thing. And that's that point it deducted is simply just because of Toby. And Dunst to a lesser extent, but those two, if we just swap them out with Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone, perfect film, probably the most perfect film ever made of film, but we don't, so we're left with what we have. So because of that, I can't give it a perfect score just because that is so fundamental to it. But man, what a picture, as Sam Ruby would say. What an absolute great picture.
Nice,
back when
nice.
movies were films.
Yeah. What a talkie.
What a talkie. What a talkie.
All right. Whose is it next time? Is it Steve? Is it me?
You did Star Wars, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
So it's yours.
And I
Okay,
did
okay.
this, yeah.
Gotcha. All right, so topic for next week then.
Or review. It's fine.
I like when we alternate. I think it's fun.
Okay.
Let's talk about staring off into the distance at my bookcases until something pops out at me. Let me get back to you.
Okay.
Works for me.
Man, Geeky Gentlemen really took a quality dive when they didn't sit around deciding what they were going to talk about on recording for 5 fucking minutes.
If you wanted to demand us do it, I'm sure we could sit here for 5 fucking minutes and come up with something. But I would rather just wait and send it to you.
That's fine. But the people don't know what to be excited for, Steve. You're depriving them.
That might matter if they ever made it to the end of a video.
This is true. You know how many people that, like, I have had on the show and have been like, yeah, just gotta do the credits, music, and stuff, go, Geeky Gentleman has credits? And I'm like, thanks, guys. Thanks.
No one fucking knows. Oh my god.
Never done this before where I've, like, had to restart or redo part of an episode of Geeky Gentleman or come back to add something to an episode of Geeky Gentleman. Fucking cutest shit ever happened tonight, and I need to let someone know about it, so I figured I'd throw it in the episode too. So this is all going in.
Alright.
So I got home, and Leah and Haley got home from the grandparents, and Leah wanted to watch something, and the Spider-Man 2 Blu-ray case was still sitting out. So she's like, can we watch Spider-Man? Can we watch Spider-Man? I'm like, sure. And so we started watching it, and she's kind of like semi-interested. She likes it when Spider-Man shows up, kind of thing. And we get to the scene with Doc Ock on the surgery table, and the doctors and everything, and we're like, Leah, you let us know if this is too scary for you, okay? Okay. Well, let us know if it gets too scary, because it's like, you know, the like pulleys rattling and shit. And then the arms start doing the fucking murder spree with all the killing. And Leah just starts, like, clapping and, like, smiling so big. And, like, kicking her feet, like, yee! This is cool!
That's fantastic.
It was so fucking funny. Haley and I just start dying, just like, yay, violence!
So I can... Just knowing from what I know about that doesn't surprise. I could probably have predicted something like that. The clapping just makes it extra, but she's absolutely gonna be into horror, like all that stuff is just, that's peak for her, so that does not surprise me.
I mean, yes and no, like, it's still, like, funny when she gets scared of stuff, but it's just, like, what she decides to be scared of, let me put it that way.
Right.
But it's just so funny of, like, yeah, this is a pretty scary scene. If you need us to turn it off, we can. Nah, she's just so fucking into it. It was so good. So I don't know where I'm gonna put this in the episode, but I was like, yeah, this was so fucking cute. I need to include it in the goddamn app.
No, people will appreciate that. That's a good little Geeky Gentleman 2.1 extra.
There we go. Yeah, there we go. Yeah. All right. Thanks, Sophie.
No problem, man. And everybody watching this, I hope you all have a good night.
All right, everyone, thanks so much for watching. Until next time, I'm the Philosopher.
I am the champion of fusion reactors.
And I need pictures of Spider-Man.
And we are your Geeky Gentlemen, and we will be discussing things.
Avenge me!
everyone. Welcome to another episode of Geeky Gentlemen. I am Sid Part 2. Joining me today is...
A geek for fun. A geek for fun.
And... Steve, are you there? Did Steve drop, like, right as we started the episode?
Man, talk about timing.
I don't know if I should, like, restart once he comes back, or if we should just keep this in.
Alright,
I'm not
my
sure.
back. I'm back. I'm back. Literally, the second you waited for me, the second you did that, my Wi-Fi just clicked out.
Sorry.
Okay. Alright,
We're
alright,
good,
let's
we're
just
good.
go ahead and restart. I'll put this at the end, though. That's pretty funny. Alright.